You're listening to the blondishnet podcast. I'm Niall Flores, and I'm your hostess. I cover topics like WordPress, blogging, social media, search engine optimization, and web design. I hope with this podcast that you'll be able to rock out your website like a rock star. So let's get it on. Thank you for tuning into the blondishnet podcast. My name is Niall Flores. This podcast is a hashtag WordPress Wednesday edition, episode 1. And so in what this episode you can expect is an introduction to what the heck this podcast is about. And 2, our topic today will be some WordPress security myths. So we're just going to go ahead and get into this. The purpose of the WordPress Wednesday podcast, or as I should say, hashtag WordPress Wednesday, is to be a little bit entertaining. Sometimes I might have a guest, or sometimes, well, actually a lot of times it may be myself, but it could be a mini podcast. It could be between 2 to 10 minutes, sometimes maybe even 15. If I have a guest, and depending on the topic, we could end up going longer than 15 minutes. But the purpose of this one is to be all about WordPress. For the majority of people who have listened to the blondishnet podcast, I have covered everything except anything focused on WordPress. And that's a problem because I love WordPress and I want to speak about it. I love blogging and love social media. I love SEO. I love all that other stuff about WordPress. Oh my gosh. So it's about time. And so please expect this to be a podcast that is done on Wednesdays, of course, hashtag WordPress Wednesday. And it coordinates with the All About WordPress group on Facebook, as well as my weekly roundup series called hashtag WordPress Wednesday. You're going to get sick of that. Anyway, I hope that this is entertaining, and I hope that it can add value to the WordPress community. And so, with that being said, let me get into the topic of today. Some WordPress security myths. So, a lot of people say some really funky things out there in the blog world. I actually have heard this not just in the blog world, I've heard this at WordPress conferences, even blogging and social media conferences or tech conferences, on the phone with a client, or I've heard these, and some of them I want to slap somebody, and some people want to just giggle and everything else, and of course I can't always do that, but this is my podcast. I'll do whatever the heck I want, right? So my first myth is WordPress is not secure. Here's a problem with this. WordPress is constantly evolving and constantly trying to keep on top of things. It is, for the most part, secure. And you, as a person, the individual, you are responsible for keeping your website secure, for keeping it up to date. I could go into this into depth and everything. I've done the security talks too. I've done the discussions and whatnot and everything else. But WordPress is, fairly secure at its core. It's what you put on top of it that kind of makes it just, start getting insane. Before we get into serious stuff and everything, this is not what this podcast is supposed to be. Yes, it's supposed to be informative, but also I want it to be a little entertaining. So please stop saying WordPress is not secure. The hackers are seeking me out personally. That's another myth. No. I'm sorry, maybe you're on number one in your world and everything, and that's great, but you are not the one being targeted unless you pissed off 4chan or some other hacker group. Then most of the people are being hit by bots and everything. It's all random and everything. You are not the target of it. It just happens. The best you could do is to keep your website secure and keep all your plugins and themes up to date. Try to use hardening techniques, WordPress plugins that are for security, that kind of stuff. Of course, like I said before, we're not going to go into depth. Another thing is if I use themes or plugins and from WordPress.org, that they'll be secure. Um, yeah, they go through some tests and they go through the review team and they look for things that are required for the WordPress standards and code. And of course, you do want to have a secure theme. But on the occasion, as people they get through and they're approved and they're updating or they're not updating some of that code, it may have been discontinued for security reasons or whatever reason and everything. Or some people might get clever and put some code in that may be malware and everything. People do all sorts of things these days. You never know. You just have to be careful and of what you put on there and vet those plugins and themes that you're installing. Really thoroughly go through all those really cool comments and the threads on there for the support and everything. Make sure that they're active on doing that kind of stuff. Make sure that the comments look genuine and everything. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said throw out the first 5 comments because they might be by somebody's mom. I thought that was pretty cool. I actually probably should make a meme of it and then go hunt down who exactly said that. But so that's another theme and everything. So, or another myth that sometimes you'll hear and everything. You have to just be really wise on what you choose. So another thing is I get a lot of clients who say this. So once I get my WordPress site up and going, is that all? No. Your maintenance is a continuous thing. Your responsibility. You cannot leave your site stagnant. You have to update it somehow every so often. If there's a plugin, if there's a theme update, if the core is having a major update or a minor security fix, you need to update those. And it's a continual process. For some people, it's tedious. If it's too tedious for you, hire somebody. There's always somebody willing. In fact, there's some pretty affordable services out there. And I'm not going to mention any, but it's easy to look them up, like WordPress Fix-It services, WordPress maintenance services, that kind of stuff. There are plenty of people that offer that. Even I offer that kind of stuff. So here's another thing. If your site is compromised, you will find out quickly. And this one it's funny and sad at the same time because some people will let their site roll and they forget to check on it and everything, and all of a sudden they get people complaining one day that they've gotten malware from visiting somebody's site, or maybe somebody got a virus or something happened, like the site's, maybe even the site's not viewing, or maybe WordPress is not working and everything. But some of these, hacks, like some are gradual over time. So, sometimes it could be one thing and all of a sudden, boom, another thing happens. Somebody, maybe one of the plugins becomes vulnerable, there's a code and all of a sudden it doesn't happen right away, but maybe you forgot to update. And then 2 days later, you can't use your site because it's been defaced, or it's your WordPress backend is blank, or there's some weird code, or you can't log into it. For example, I had a client that somehow one of the plugins had become vulnerable and they didn't know it. They thought that they had updated and everything else, but they kind of got lax and they left it for about 2 weeks. And all of a sudden they couldn't log into their website. And so as I kept going in, I found out the hack was so bad, it wiped out the WP user table in the database. That's terrible. And, so you really have to keep on top of these things. After that myth, My password is not good enough. Well, if your password isn't reading as strong in your WordPress backend, a lot of times with WordPress these days, you actually are forced to have a strong password. It actually comes with a password generator. And so you should probably use that. So don't make it that easy for people to guess. If you have to, there are places like LastPass that really help you manage your password so that you can log into WordPress. You might want to also try to get into doing two-factor authentication. And I'll go ahead and share like LastPass and two-factor authentication type stuff, so that you can hook yourself up with that and stay secure with your logging in and everything. One last myth is about it's involving security plugins and everything, and just installing any willy-nilly will any do. Just like in choosing your themes and plugins, you should vet your security plugins. There are plenty out there. Security, Brute Force, or from Jetpack, WordPress, iTheme Security, and also WordFence. These are all really good plugins, and they could do a lot of things. The thing is you can install these plugins, but you also have to configure them. There are some default settings that each of them come with whenever you install it, but you really have to go through and set things like, how many login attempts will you allow, and how in a certain amount of time are you going to allow this to happen, and how many bots are you going to allow to hit your site, and at what time are you going to rule out fake bots, or are you going to only do trusted bots? There's all sorts of settings and everything in these plugins. Some of them even go further and are a guide to like hardening your website. So it's really, really important that yes, I am repeating this. Please, no, don't just install the plugin. Please configure it for your own sake. And while you're at it, get yourself a backup plugin, install it, and configure it to run regular backups. That way, in the case that you do get hacked, that backup might actually roll you back so you can get secure again. I hope you enjoyed these little myths I shared with you. I think that's enough for now, especially for this hashtag WordPress Wednesday episode. And feel free to leave a comment below and share this out to Facebook and Twitter and all the things. So thank you so much. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to this blondishnet podcast episode. And once again, my name is Niall Flores. You can either like, comment, or even ask questions wherever this podcast is posted at. I'd be happy to answer them. If you're looking for WordPress design and development services, I actually specialize in designing and developing WordPress websites that convert, which means I can deliver a website that you can use in order to gain subscribers, social sharers, comments, and even buyers. So, in other words, I make sure you get a return on investment. So please seek me out at blondish.net. That's blondish.net. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next blondish.net podcast episode.